For decades, Jennifer Aniston has been more than just a star. She has been a living symbol of beauty, grace, and resilience, forever etched into the collective memory of popular culture through her iconic portrayal of Rachel Green in Friends. She is not only America's sweetheart, but the heartbeat of an entire generation, where every radiant smile concealed a crack, and every graceful step was taken on the shattered glass of private pain. Behind the golden glow and glittering spotlight is a woman bearing wounds that time could never heal. A fractured childhood, love stories that crumbled under the world's unforgiving gaze, and a silent, soul-tearing battle to become a mother, ending in despair. Yet now, at 55, life's storm still clings tightly to her. A cold, consuming pain that threatens to shatter the peace she has spent a lifetime building. If Jennifer Aniston has ever made you laugh, cry, or believe in love again, let your like be a tribute to this remarkable woman of unyielding strength. Behind every golden surname lies a story far less glamorous. And for Jennifer Joanna Aniston, born on February 11, 1969, in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, the glitter of a Hollywood lineage could never mask the cracks in its fragile foundation. Long before the world adored her as Rachel Green on Friends, she was just a little girl caught between the light of the camera and the shadows at home. Her father, John Aniston, a Greek-born actor with a commanding screen presence, and her mother, Nancy Dow, an American actress of Italian, English, Irish, Scottish, and Greek descent, gave her a heritage steeped in culture and art. She had two half-brothers, John Mellick, older, from her mother's first marriage, and Alex Aniston, much younger, from her father's later relationship. Her godfather, the legendary actor Telly Savalas, painted another stroke of Hollywood into her childhood. But fame, she would later say, was something that surrounded me, not something that filled me. When Jennifer was just a toddler, her father's career took the family across the country to the buzzing heart of New York City. The skyscrapers and bright marquees dazzled her young eyes, but the light could not chase away the growing darkness inside her home. By the time she was 9, the marriage between her parents had fractured beyond repair. One day, her father left, not just for work, but out of her daily life. For a long stretch, she has recalled that moment as more than an absence. It was the silence afterward that was the hardest, she said. That heartbreaking quiet taught her far too young that love could disappear without warning. At home, another battle was unfolding. Her mother, known for her striking beauty, often held Jennifer to rigid standards of appearance. Comments about her weight, her posture, or how she should wear her hair were frequent, meant perhaps as guidance, but to a sensitive child, they could feel cruel. The words lingered like tiny shards, planting seeds of self-doubt that would take decades to unearth. Life was not cushioned by wealth. Money was often tight, and emotional warmth could feel like a luxury. Jennifer learned early to entertain others, to make people laugh, to diffuse tension, not just as a gift, but as a shield. If they were laughing, she once said, maybe they wouldn't see the cracks. As she stepped tentatively into adulthood and an emerging career in Hollywood, one of the deepest wounds of her youth would be torn open again. In 1996, her mother appeared on a tabloid talk show, revealing private details of her daughter's life. The fracture turned truly tragic when Nancy published a memoir, From Mother and Daughter to Friends, telling her side of the story to the world. To Jennifer, it felt like a betrayal, exposed under the harshest lights. For the next 15 years, she and her mother would not speak. Some things, she later reflected, take a long time to heal, if they ever do. These early storms, a father's sudden absence, A mother's unyielding scrutiny, the public rupture of trust, shaped Jennifer into someone both guarded and fiercely self-reliant. They gave her an empathy for pain she had seen up close, and a resilience that would carry her through the unforgiving glare of fame. In the warmth of the spotlight, millions would see the radiant smile, the easy wit, the poise. But in the quiet corners of her memory lives the little girl who learned to survive in a world where affection was uncertain and trust could be fragile. A girl who would turn those scars into the steel of her spine, building one of Hollywood's most enduring and admired careers. It was in the quiet, hidden corners of her childhood refuge, scribbling in worn notebooks, slipping away into daydreams, that Jennifer first felt the magnetic pull of performance, a fragile spark that would one day outshine the long shadows cast by her fractured home. By 1975, at just 6 years old, while most children lost themselves in playground laughter, she was already crossing the threshold into imaginary worlds, discovering in drama a sanctuary where she could be anyone, anywhere. Her parents enrolled her at the Waldorf School, a haven where creativity was not just encouraged, but celebrated, giving her the first safe stage on which to test her voice. Even then, she sensed that storytelling could be more than an escape. It could be a lifeline, a way to touch hearts she had never met. In 1983, at 14, she stepped into a crucible that would both sharpen and challenge her. The prestigious LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York City, York City. Here, under the watchful guidance of revered acting coach Anthony Abison, she learned that true acting wasn't about pretending, it was about standing unguarded, letting the world see your soul. In cramped rehearsal rooms, smelling faintly of dust and paint, she found both exhilaration and fear. "I just wanted to belong somewhere," she would say decades later, her voice carrying both gratitude and the ache of those teenage years. Graduating in 1987 did not usher in the dream. It ushered in the grind. In her late teens and early 20s, Jennifer pieced together survival from odd jobs, selling timeshares in dimly lit telemarketing offices, serving meals to customers who barely met her eyes, and peddling deliveries through Manhattan's unforgiving streets on a rattling second-hand bicycle. Each shift bought her just enough time for one more audition, one more fragile hope. Her first flicker of screen life came in 1988, a blink and you'll miss it role in Mac and Me, followed by modeling work for Nutrisystem and scattered commercials that kept her dream breathing. But faintly, television proved more punishing. Between 1990 and 1994, she landed roles in Malloy, Ferris Bueller, Camp Cucamonga, The Edge, and muddling through each was lit for a moment, then snuffed out before it could warm her career. "I kept thinking, maybe this isn't for me," she later confessed, her words heavy with the memory of those false starts. The cycle of auditions, brief glimmers of success, and sudden cancellations gnawed at her spirit. By 1994, at just 25, she was emotionally threadbare, quietly wondering if the little girl who had once hidden in stories had been naive to believe she could live in them for real. And then, fate arrived in the most unremarkable disguise. One ordinary afternoon at a gas station in Los Angeles, she crossed paths with Warren Littlefield, then president of NBC Entertainment. The conversation was brief, but its weight was immeasurable. He urged her not to quit, to audition for a new sitcom the network was developing. "You have something. Don't quit," he told her. And to Jennifer, those words felt like sunlight after years of overcast skies. That sitcom would be called Friends. She couldn't yet know that the role waiting for her would redefine television, catapult her to global fame, and etch her name permanently into the map of popular culture. But in that moment, what mattered was simple. For the first time in a long time, someone in power had truly seen her. And so, she didn't quit. When Jennifer stepped into that NBC audition room in 1994, she could not have imagined she was walking straight into the role that would crown her in glory and bind her in invisible chains. She had read for Monica, but the producers saw something they could not let go, an alchemy of humor, fragility, and that rare spark that makes a character breathe. And so, Rachel Green became hers, as if the role had been waiting for her all along. From the moment she delivered her first line, her quick wit, disarming warmth, and flashes of unguarded vulnerability lit up the screen. Not just for the studio audience, but for millions who would come to feel as though she were a friend in their own living rooms. For the next 10 years, Friends didn't just own Thursday nights. It became a cultural heartbeat, pulsing in every corner of the globe. The Ross and Rachel saga turned into television's most anticipated love story, cementing Jennifer as the face of romance for an entire generation. Yet, behind the glittering laughter, she was learning the harsh rhythm of the spotlight. Every haircut became a news item, every outfit dissected. Her own life became an open page, read and rewritten by strangers. The lines between Jennifer and Rachel blurred, until even she sometimes felt the weight of the character pressing into her own skin. Fame, she realized, could wrap you in warmth one moment and scorch you the next. The trophies told part of the story: an Emmy, a Golden Globe, a Screen Actors Guild Award. And by the final season, the unprecedented $1 million per episode made her one of television's highest-paid stars. But the numbers hid what the camera could not capture: the quiet exhaustion of expectation. Be perfect. Be funny. Be the Rachel they've built you into. It was a gift beyond measure, yet also a gilded cage she was determined to unlock. In 2002, she broke from the mold with The Good Girl, stripping away glamour to reveal a raw, aching humanity that stunned critics. A year later, Bruce Almighty shattered box office records, proving she could hold her own in Hollywood's biggest arenas. Each role was a small rebellion, a reminder to herself, most of all, that she was more than one face, one voice, one story. The years after Friends were a delicate dance between reinvention and preservation. The breakup, 2006, let her mine Heartbreak for humor. Marley and Me, 2008, drew $200 million and left audiences tear-streaked. Horrible Bosses, 2011, showcased her fearless comedic side. And We're the Millers, 2013, added another hit to the list on paper. It was triumph after triumph. But privately, she still waged the quiet battles, protecting the slivers of herself that the public could never have, even as the world demanded more. Her return to television in 2019 with The Morning Show was not a comeback. It was a reclamation. Wearing both the crown of star and the mantle of executive producer, she poured decades of resilience into a story about truth, power, and survival in a cutthroat industry. The role earned her Emmy and Golden Globe nominations, but, more importantly, it gave her a platform to speak with the full force of her voice. Alongside this, she embraced streaming projects like Netflix's Dumplin', 2018, and gifted the world a poignant moment of nostalgia with HBO Max's Friends, The Reunion, 2021, bridging generations without ever standing still. Through every reinvention, Jennifer Aniston has kept her seat in Hollywood's highest circle, not by clinging to the past, but by daring to rewrite herself in the present. The little girl who once feared the door might slam shut forever now walks through any she chooses. And still, after all the years, all the headlines, all the roles that have made her a household name, one truth remains. Jennifer keeps a part of herself untouchable, hidden away from the glare, a piece that belongs only to her. Fresh off the roaring success of Friends and a run of film roles that silenced anyone who thought she was just a sitcom star, Jennifer Aniston stood in rarefied air. She was America's sweetheart, a global icon. Her smile bright enough to light up billboards, her name big enough to command a movie poster. The world knew her as Rachel Green, as the quick-witted charmer on every magazine rack. But in 1998, at the dazzling height of her career, life was about to hand her something that felt even more extraordinary. Love, and not the scripted kind. It began quietly, without red carpets or press junkets, arranged by mutual friends who thought they might suit. A blind date, they called it, though everyone in Hollywood could have drawn their faces from memory. Brad Pitt was cinema's golden boy, a leading man whose blend of smolder and sincerity had made him a household name from Legends of the Fall to Seven. They were two supernovas burning at full intensity, colliding in a city where collisions often end in fire. The night they met, there were no cameras, no handlers, just two people sitting across from each other, trading stories until the noise of the world thinned to silence. It was easy, Jennifer would later recall, her voice soft with nostalgia. Easy in a way that made the endless flashbulbs and gossip columns seem far away. As if she'd stepped out of the glare and into something real. When they stepped into public view together, the reaction was instant and electric. The tabloids anointed them Hollywood's golden couple before they'd even boarded their first vacation flight. To the outside world, they weren't just dating. They were a walking emblem of romance, proof that beauty and fame could coexist with something genuine. The air around them seemed to shimmer with possibility. By 1999, Brad proposed, and the media frenzy reached fever pitch. Paparazzi camped outside restaurants, speculation about the wedding filled column inches, and fans treated their love story like a serial they couldn't stop watching. Jennifer wore her happiness without disguise, on red carpets, where their hands never strayed far from each other's, in interviews where his name drew an unforced smile, and in those stolen candids, where they looked like two people sharing a secret. On July 29, 2000, they wed in Malibu. It was a fortress against the outside world. High walls guarding something both monumental and intimate. Inside, 200 guests gathered under a sky painted gold by the California sun. There were cascades of flowers, the glow of 1,000 candles. And when night fell, fireworks over the Pacific that mirrored the extravagance of their joy. Jennifer, in her beaded gown, walked toward Brad with a look that could melt even the most cynical hearts. The grainy, long-lens photographs that trickled out only fueled the myth. Here, finally, was Hollywood's happily ever after. Their marriage wasn't just personal, it was creative. Together, they founded Plan B Entertainment, a production company built on the belief that storytelling could shape the world. To their admirers, it was more than a union. It was a fusion of ambition and vision, a promise that they would build not just a home, but a legacy. Friends would later say she seemed lighter in those years, as though the guardedness she'd carried since childhood had been gently set down. In interviews, she spoke of Brad with an ease and warmth that suggested she'd found not just a husband, but a partner in the truest sense. "He's my best friend," she told one reporter, eyes bright. For a while, it felt like her life had reached its perfect symmetry. A career at its peak, a marriage envied by millions, a future that stretched wide and unbroken. Looking back now, it's easy to see why their story captured so many hearts. It wasn't just that they were impossibly beautiful. It was that the timing was perfect. Both had weathered enough of fame's storms to recognize calm seas when they found them. To see them together was to believe, if only briefly, that in the chaos of Hollywood, something pure could last. In sunlit Malibu afternoons, when the cameras were gone and the world was far away, Jennifer Aniston looked as though she had found exactly what the little girl inside her had always wanted: a safe place to belong. For a time, she had it. And for a time, it felt unbreakable. Every fairy tale has an ending, but Jennifer Aniston never imagined hers would be rewritten so publicly, so brutally. In 2000, at 31, she had stood under a sky of Malibu fireworks, believing she was stepping into forever. 5 years later, at 36, she found herself staring into a very different kind of light: the relentless flash of paparazzi bulbs. The first cracks had been hairline, almost invisible, hidden beneath the golden veneer of two intertwined careers. Between red carpets and Plan B board meetings, between the joy of shared victories and the quiet pride of watching each other work, something subtle began to shift. The relentless schedules that once felt like proof of ambition now became an unspoken wedge. Weeks blurred into months spent oceans apart, each consumed by the demands of film sets and press tours, until intimacy became a rare guest. "We were like ships passing in the night," she would later reflect, waving from distant harbors we couldn't reach in time. By early 2005, the whispers grew teeth. At first, it was background noise in the endless hum of celebrity gossip. Then it swelled into a roar that followed her into every room. Photos were dissected, a glance not returned, a ring finger bare, separate arrivals to events they had always entered hand in hand. And then came the headline storm, the suggestion that Brad's on-screen chemistry with Angelina Jolie and Mr. and Mrs. Smith had crossed into reality. Neither confirmed it, but in a culture that feasts on implication, silence was its own damning verdict. Jennifer wasn't just living her life anymore. She was trapped inside a narrative she hadn't written, replayed on every TV screen, splashed across every glossy cover, until it seeped into the walls of her home. The announcement of their separation in January 2005 landed like a detonation. Fans mourned as if they had lost something personal. But for Jennifer, it was the dismantling of the life she had imagined growing old inside paparazzi camped outside her home. Their camera shutters clicked like a mechanical heartbeat whenever she stepped outside. Even the most mundane errands, buying groceries, grabbing coffee, became gauntlets. Each outing, another opportunity for the world to hunt for evidence of her collapse. "It was unbelievably painful," she told Vanity Fair later, her voice steady but weighted, "and I don't know if I'll ever get used to how public it was." Then came the cruelest wound, the rumor that she hadn't wanted children, that her own ambition had poisoned the marriage. For a woman whose face, body, and choices had been dissected for decades, this accusation cut deeper than any other. "I do, and I will," she said sharply, a flash of fire betraying the hurt beneath. It wasn't just gossip. It was an assault on her womanhood, her capacity for love, the life she might still build. The nights were the hardest. Friends recall her returning to a house so quiet, the silence seemed to press in on the walls. The bed felt too big. Coffee was brewed for one. She leaned heavily on therapy, using it as a lifeline. A place where she could sort through the wreckage without the roar of the outside world. Yoga anchored her to the present, each inhale and exhale reminding her she was still here. And her closest friends, the ones who had known her before the fame, became her shield. On set, she sometimes arrived with eyes rimmed red from the night before, yet delivered performances so layered they felt like open wounds on screen. She didn't hide the pain, she turned it into craft. Heartbreak became truth. Loss became art. For the tabloids, the Brad and Jen split was gold. For her, it was a public autopsy of love under the harshest lights imaginable. The woman who emerged from that crucible was not the same one who had walked down the Malibu aisle in 2000. She was sharper, more guarded, but also more certain of who she was without anyone else's shadow. She no longer needed the world to believe in her fairy tale. She had learned to live without it. Years later, she would speak of that time without venom, as though she had made peace with the fact that not all love stories are meant to last. "You can't hold on to anger," she said. "It eats you alive. You have to forgive, even if you can't forget." These were not the words of the 20-something America's sweetheart. They belonged to a woman who had walked through fire and found she could stand unshaken in the ashes. For Jennifer Aniston, the end of her marriage was more than a heartbreak. It was a collision between love and the machinery of fame, between private grief and public hunger. And yet, from the ruins of one of the most scrutinized breakups of her generation, she carried away something more enduring than the fairy tale itself: the quiet, unshakable strength to begin again. Every ending leaves an echo. For Jennifer Aniston, the echo of 2005 didn't fade when the divorce papers were signed. It reverberated for years, amplified by a world that refused to let the story go. Almost overnight, the fairy tale image of Brad and Jen was replaced by the fevered fascination with Brangelina. The headlines shifted, the photographs changed, and suddenly, the man who had once been the other half of her life was now part of a new, sprawling narrative, one that played out across continents and magazine covers. Brad and Angelina's growing family, the biological children, the adoptions, the humanitarian trips, became a global spectacle. And every time another baby was born, every time a new photo of their picture-perfect brood appeared, Jennifer's name was dragged back into the spotlight she had never asked for. The comparisons were relentless, the juxtapositions cruel. Radiant family portraits set against the tired trope of Jennifer's empty arms. Tabloids turned her body into a battleground. Was she pregnant? Was that a bump? Had she waited too long? Why was she still childless? The questions weren't just invasive. They were corrosive, gnawing at the very core of her identity as a woman. "It was exhausting," she would say years later, her voice softer now, but still carrying the weight of that scrutiny. "I was living my life, doing my work, and yet somehow I was reduced to whether or not I had a ring on my finger or a child in my belly." The heartbreak of losing her marriage was already a wound. This was salt ground into it, again and again, by strangers who believed they had the right to define her worth. Jennifer endured, but endurance didn't come easily. She rebuilt herself slowly, brick by emotional brick. In those years, work became both a refuge and a proving ground. She chose roles that defied the America's Sweetheart box. The Good Girl, 2002, had shown she could strip away glamour for grit. But now she pushed further. Cake, 2014, laid her raw and unadorned before audiences, earning critical acclaim and proving she could channel pain into art. The Morning Show, 2019, allowed her to pour her own scars into a character navigating betrayal, sexism, and the unrelenting glare of the public eye. Off-screen, she anchored herself in the constants that fame couldn't corrode. A tight circle of loyal friends, the grounding discipline of yoga, the quiet work of therapy. These weren't trends, they were survival. Breath by breath, pose by pose, session by session, she stitched herself back together in ways the public would never see. In 2016, after years of swallowing the media's narrative, she took back the pen.